The decision was written. It was approved in meetings. It was prepared for signature, but the signature never came. This wasn't a proposal that was rejected or an idea that was shot down. This was a fully formed decision, vetted and agreed upon, that reached the very final step and then just stopped. Today, we're re-exploring what happens when a decision makes it all the way to the finish line, but never crosses it. We often think that decisions fail at the beginning, when they're being debated or formulated. We assume that big battles are fought in the early stages, where ideas clash and compromises are forged. But some of the most consequential failures happen silently, at the very end. This is the story of one such decision, a document that navigated the entire bureaucratic maze, only to stall right before the finish line. It's a case study in how inaction can become a decision in itself, with consequences just as real as any signed order. The process began, as many do, with a clear and pressing need. An issue that was once a minor concern had started to escalate. It was becoming a problem that could no longer be ignored. So, following established protocol, a document was drafted. This wasn't some back-of-the-napkin idea. It was a formal response, carefully constructed to address the situation. It went through multiple rounds of review. Different departments weighed in, offering their perspectives and suggesting revisions. Edits were made, language was refined, and the document was honed until it represented a consensus view. It was a textbook example of how a system is supposed to work. The document moved up the chain of command, gathering approvals at each stage. It was discussed in meetings, its merits were debated, and its logic was tested. With each step, it gained momentum and legitimacy. Finally, it arrived on the desk where it would receive its final, authorizing signature. It had passed every test and cleared every hurdle. It was ready. So what was in this document that caused it to stall at the 1-yard line? You might expect it to contain something radical, a controversial proposal that would shake things up. But the truth is, the contents were surprisingly mundane. The decision wasn't about a massive overhaul or a dramatic shift in direction. Instead, it focused on practical adjustments. It proposed shifting a few timelines, moving them back to create a more realistic schedule. It reordered some priorities, placing more urgent tasks ahead of less critical ones. It also clearly outlined the consequences of not making these adjustments, painting a picture of the risks involved if the current path was maintained. There was nothing in it that could be considered politically explosive or organizationally disruptive. It was a sensible, pragmatic solution to a growing problem. That's what made the subsequent delay so perplexing. If the decision was so straightforward and uncontroversial, why did it suddenly grind to a halt? The logic was sound, the support was there, and the path was clear, but still, it waited. The document sat, ready for signature, but the moment never came. Meetings were still held. Of course, the topic would come up, and there would be more discussion. We're just refining a few minor details, was a common refrain. Small revisions were suggested, often circling back to points that had already been settled. A word was changed here, a sentence rephrased there. Each revision, no matter how trivial, seemed to reset the clock, providing a reason for another round of review, another slight delay. The signature was constantly postponed. It would be scheduled for tomorrow, then for the end of the week, then for the following week. Each time a new reason would surface for the delay. An urgent matter had come up. A key person was unavailable. More time was needed to socialize the idea. The postponements became a pattern, a rhythm of deferral. The decision was never rejected. It was never officially sent back for a major overhaul. It was simply kept in a state of perpetual limbo, always just one step away from being finalized, but never actually getting there. While the unsigned document gathered dust, the world outside didn't stop. The conditions that had prompted the decision in the first place continued to evolve. The very problem it was designed to solve grew larger and more complex. The window of opportunity for an effective response began to close. External events, completely unrelated to the decision-making process, started to overtake the careful planning that had gone into the document. The timelines that were meant to be adjusted became laughably obsolete. The priorities it sought to reorder were thrown into chaos by new, more pressing emergencies. The carefully crafted plan was becoming irrelevant, not because it was flawed, but because time was rendering it moot. By the time decisive action was truly and urgently needed, the original decision was still unsigned. The moment had passed. The carefully constructed solution was now a historical artifact, a snapshot of a problem that had since morphed into something much bigger and much more difficult to manage. The delay had effectively become the new strategy. What happened to the decision? It was never formally withdrawn or cancelled. It simply faded away. In later documents and meeting minutes, you can find subtle clues to its fate. There's no mention of the meticulously prepared plan. Instead, the language shifts. Memos begin to reference options under consideration or exploring potential pathways. It was as if the original decision had never existed at all. The entire process, all the drafting, reviewing, and approving, was quietly erased from the institutional memory. The problem was now framed as something new, requiring a fresh approach, even though it was the same issue, just magnified by inaction. The unsigned decision became a ghost in the machine, an undecision whose existence was implicitly denied. This retroactive erasure is a fascinating phenomenon. It's a way for an organization to sidestep accountability. By pretending a decision was never close to being made, you don't have to explain why it wasn't. It's a clean slate, but one that ignores the history that led to the crisis. An unsigned decision doesn't just disappear without a trace, it leaves a void, and that void is filled by consequences. The problem that the decision was meant to address didn't go away, it metastasized. The risks that were outlined in the document became realities. The manageable issue turned into a full-blown crisis, one that required far more resources and far more drastic measures to contain. The delay itself became the outcome. In the absence of a formal choice, the default path or one of inaction was chosen, and that path led directly to the negative consequences the original decision was designed to prevent. The failure to sign was not a neutral act. It was an active choice to let events unfold without intervention. Inaction is a form of action, and its costs can be immense. The lingering presence of the almost decision also created confusion and paralysis within the organization, as people waited for a direction that never came. So we were left to reflect on this strange creature, the decision that dies at the finish line. Some decisions are openly rejected, their flaws exposed and debated. That's a healthy process. Some are revised, adapted to new information and improved. That's also a healthy process. And then there are the ones like this. The ones that are prepared, approved, and then left unsigned. They aren't killed. They are simply allowed to expire. They represent a unique kind of failure of courage, a failure of will, a failure to take the final, necessary step. They tell a story not of conflict, but of avoidance, and they serve as a powerful reminder that the most critical moment in any decision-making process is the moment of commitment. Without it, even the most perfect plan is just a collection of words on a page. If you find stories like this fascinating, the hidden histories and the decisions that history forgot, then you'll want to follow our channel. Unfiled History publishes one new story like this every single day. Thanks for watching.